If there's a looming threat to the future of civilization, it is surely idiocy and ideologically driven lunacy. Good governance, democratic outcomes and sensible policy are all under threat right across the Western world. And it's not the mainstream voters doing the damage. On the contrary, they insist on common sense. It's the so-called media and political elites that are indulging in misleading, anti-intellectual, emotive and ideological campaigns. This is no more obvious than in the climate change debate, which should be a serious issue. But instead of debating facts, science, economics, technology, costs and benefits, and of course policy options, the United Nations hands the floor over to a hysterical teenager.
You all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones.
Well, aren't we the lucky ones to hear about it? Now, this ought to be pretty hilarious stuff. We should be able to giggle and scoff at it, of course. But laugh as we might, there are two things about this that are very, very disturbing. First, the adults in the room were applauding this. There are actual grown-ups there at that UN event that are so malleable, so intent on hyperbole and alarmism that they're willing to cheer this sort of teenage hysteria at a global climate change summit that's supposed to discuss real issues in rational terms. And second, you have to worry about the speaker. She is, of course, Greta Thunberg, a Swedish vegan climate campaigner who's been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, anxiety disorders and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Now, we all know about the emotional roller coaster rides that teenagers go through, which is why we tend to encourage them, nurture them, without taking their obsessions too seriously. But this girl seems overwrought, and instead of caring for her, there seems to be a movement taking advantage of her, and taking advantage of her obviously confected, unwarranted and overblown angst.
People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, the adults didn't go and console this girl or counsel her, you know, take her off stage, comfort her, educate her and calm her down with some facts. They just applauded her. They continue to pump her up. They love the publicity and they love the show. Now, Greta Thunberg is the poster girl for this sort of hysteria, but it is widespread. Children and teenagers, as we know, are prone to group emotional experience and they're not armed with the facts and the media encourages them. The media just encourages them to go on with scant regard for the facts and an overemphasis on the emotion, and we end up with lots of stuff just like this.
I just don't know if they're going to do anything. And I'm so concerned with the fact that if they're not going to change anything, then what's going to happen to humankind? What's going to happen to the whole world if no one does anything?
We are on the outskirts of the biggest catastrophe humanity has ever faced, and our government is doing nothing.
Honestly, if the climate issue is as bad as the adult alarmists and the political activists say, they don't need to do this. Surely most sensible people around the world are turned off by this embarrassing sideshow. No wonder, and thank God, that Scott Morrison is steering clear of the climate summit, although these issues are bound to come up when he speaks at the UN General Assembly. But believe me, as someone who's been there for top-level meetings many times, the UN is no place to expect rational debate or serious consideration of workable policy solutions. Having said all that, there was one thing that Greta Thunberg said in New York that I wholeheartedly agree with.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean.
Yes, Greta, you should be at home and in school. You should lighten up. You should be saving your hysteria for some pop band, perhaps, and using your time to learn as much about the environment as you can. And those adults encouraging you at the United Nations know that all too well. But they're using you for their own amusement and their blatant political grandstanding.